At time of recording, we're in February 2025, and I'm going to give you a first look at the current development in ContentBlocks 2. As you might have seen, we've been working on this on and off for the last couple of years. And 2025 is the year that it's finally time to get this done. We've been working on the roadmap to make sure that we have all the items that we need to finish this major upgrade, and we're getting ready to share all of this with you very, very soon, along with the release of this video actually. So that's amazing. If you're not sure about ContentBlocks 2, what it is, what we're trying to do here, it is a complete rebuild. We've rebuilt the interface from scratch. We've rebuilt the data model from scratch. We're taking in all the things that work really well in version 1. All the modular content, all the blocks, all the sort of interactions that we like, that our clients like. But we're expanding that, and we're using that to build something even better. At the time when we're recording this, we're about to launch a crowdfunder. So what we're trying to do here is actually get enough funding so we can block out most of the summer, most of the coming months, to work on this and actually get it to an alpha release. Once we've hit alpha, we're going to work towards beta, and then we're going to do a final release, which we want to do by the end of the year. To give you an idea of what you're actually helping us do, this is the first time we're making an actual recording of the current status of the project. We presented some of the vision in 2023 in Berlin. This is the first time we're actually making a full video. In this video, I'm going to show you what has been done so far, highlight some things we're working on, some things where we're going. We'll go over the roadmap that has now been published when you see this video. We're just going to take a look at sort of like what we're doing, why we think this is something worth investing in. So basically, this is what ContentBlocks 2 looks like at the moment. It should feel familiar if you've used ContentBlocks 1. However, it is more visual, it is more clear. One of the things that we don't like in version 1 is, we call it the 50 shades of gray. There's a lot of layers, there's a lot of layering, there's a lot of nesting, there's a lot of framing of your content. And we want to take that away. We want to focus on the content itself. For example, if you take this heading, it's just a heading. It looks like a heading. It's not an input type that renders into a heading on the front end. It's just a heading. And this applies to pretty much all the content. One thing you'll notice as you go through this product, once you focus on something, whether it's a block or a layout or etc., more context related to that specific element appears. So for example, if we click on this heading, you can see it expands. We now see a little toolbar at the top. We see the name of the field of the block. We see a little toolbar here that gives us some options. And you know, this is just like giving us more information about what this specific thing is, because you do still need that context. This applies to any field. So for example, our text area, which is a very simple text area. We also support rich text. I'll look at that later. As soon as you click in it, you see we have a toolbar at the top. This also gives us a description for our customers to help guide them in what they need to use it for. We have our toolbar. We have our text, which again, it looks like text. It's not an input type. It's not a framed piece of content. It is just the content that you can edit as you need. One thing you also notice, and I'll click in it again so you can see it. When you select a block, you also get this new drawer at the bottom. In this case, we have a color and a background field here, but that's obviously configurable. And this drawer is basically similar to what you use settings for in ContentBlocks 1. So instead of having everything in a model window or having everything exposed as a field, you can also choose to have it in the drawer. And the drawer is meant to be like, this is what your content looks like. And these are additional options you can use to change that, to style that, to you know, expand on it. It's not the actual content. It's sort of like these additional attributes that you can define. Maybe a better example of that is this quote block that we have below. So this quote block consists, like any block in ContentBlocks 2, of multiple fields. So we have our main field, which is a simple text area field. We've applied some styling to this to make it italic. We have 2 label fields, origin and author, and just 2 text fields to sort of like give this content, this is the main content, sort of give it some structure. Because sometimes you can't just represent something just by the raw content itself. Sometimes that needs a little structure. However, when you click in it, when you focus this block, you can see the drawer pops down again. And in this case, we're offering a different style drop down, which gives our clients the opportunity to change sort of like what it looks like. In this case, it doesn't affect the manager preview. However, in other cases, and we'll talk about this more later. For example, this alert box, this style actually updates live within the manager based on your selection. But just for this example, this is why we use the drawer to sort of like show you these additional options. The context for your content is there. It's just hidden until you focus on something. Another example of hiding this context until you interact with something is all these little insert block buttons that you see on the left side of a layout. When you're not focused or you focus on a different layout, you just see the content. Only as soon as you interact with this specific layout, we add this additional framing, this additional context to allow you to insert stuff wherever it needs to go. To show you how that looks. At the moment, it's very simple. You can define a font awesome icon, give it a title or name and a description. This is something that will probably evolve further as we get closer to beta. In ContentBlocks 1, you obviously have categories that you can apply to all these elements, and we'll definitely look at bringing that back. So that's this idea of focusing on the content, right? So this is very visual. It's not a front end editor like Fred, but it does focus more on presenting your content the way it's going to be in the front end. Obviously, you can add your own custom styling to this, like we did, for example, with this quote. We made this italics. That's just configuration. So if you have a client that does need a one-on-one representation of what it's going to look like, CSS will give you a lot of those options now very easily in ContentBlocks 2. Some other input types that we currently support in the current version. We've got our basic image input. So just clicking on the image will allow us to browse using the ModX media browser and say, you know, I want this image, or maybe I want this one. Very simple, very easy. We already talked about a simple text area. We have a very simple color picker. And this is something that we will be expanding on as well. It does show like this automatically updates as soon as you select. And how we set it up, I'll show you in just a little bit. One thing I want to note is that, for example, this alert box that we already briefly clicked into earlier, this is not a specific field type. This is not an alert box field type. This is just a standard block with a text area. We have in this case an icon field, which gives us all the font awesome icons, or we can search. Maybe we want to add an icon of a sun there. Very simple, very basic, easy to use. And all this configuration, this dynamic changing is all just done in the configuration of ContentBlocks 2. Obviously, if you do have a very specific use case that does need more of a customized field type, you can definitely do that. But the idea is that a lot of custom field types in ContentBlocks 1 are going to be solved in version 2 just by configuring one or more fields in a certain way using a plugin. Which is more like we're more composing all these different elements instead of forcing a specific element on you. To give you an example of what the insert layout looks like, it's also very basic and probably going to be expanded upon by the beta release. We just define our layout in the same way. We're using currently a visual representation of the different columns that are in there and just our title and our description. This is again something that in version 1 supports categories and has some more options. For now, this is sort of like a very easy to use, very stripped back version of the things that we like about version 1 and how we want to implement those in version 2. Let's look at some more things we can do with some of these fields and layouts. Let's add a clean layout, just the full width. And let's look at rich text, for example. In this case, we're using Redactor, which is our rich text editor. We have this configured right now to be in air mode. What that means is I can start typing text, but there's no toolbar. There's no sort of like indication that this is a rich text editor until you start selecting different content. And then you can say, okay, this needs to be bold. Maybe I want this to be a link. And this is going to use standard Redactor features. This does still in Redactor default to having like this sort of like this frame around it and this background. This is something that we'll address in Redactor when ContentBlocks 2 comes out. Because that's just going to be a different theme for the editor to make it really native and look the same as a normal text area, for example. However, if you use TinyMCE or CK editor, you'll also be able to use that with ContentBlocks 2. It would just have, all the rich text editor frame around it. All right, let's look at something else. One of the things that's newish in version 2, if we use our text options block here, is validation. So you get more control over enforcing different ways content needs to be used. These are all very simple. These are just text areas or text fields. This one needs to be at least 20 characters. And you can see that it was validating that characters. This one can only be 5 characters, so long words doesn't count. It won't let me type beyond that. And AZ only is now. It is going to let me type other items. However, it is going to mark it as invalid. Which is just going to help you deal with more specific content that has some restrictions to it. The same applies also to number fields. So we now have a dedicated number field, which we haven't had in ContentBlocks 1 for a long time. It just hasn't really been a need there. In version 2, we did add it, and that can also have validation applied to it, so it can only be certain values as needed. Okay. We've looked at some of the basic input types. There are a lot of input types that we have not yet implemented. This is one of the things that over the last months and years, most of my time has gone into the framework, into sort of like the user interface that you see, everything that goes on under the hood, the data modeling, all of that. We're getting to the point where we are going to start implementing all the different input types again that we had in version 1. Details on that is in the roadmap, which we'll look at towards the end of this video. But that's something to note. Like, we don't have all the input types yet, and that's going to be something we're drastically expanding as we get on with this project. While we're in development, there is also this neat little debugging at the bottom, which just shows us how the content is structured. One thing I want to highlight about this is that every single object, every single type of element in ContentBlocks 2 is saved to its own database table. So if we look at, for example, our layouts, we have a layout with ID 17, which has this specific type, this title, and it then contains columns which contain the blocks. So this means that in the database, we have a table for layouts. And that table is going to have a record with ID 17 that represents this first layout, basically. Okay, I just realized you've been seeing double cursors on the screen until now. I'm not going to record the video just because of that. I will fix it. I'm sorry for if that was very distracting. This is one of the things where I need to get used to recording these videos and get everything set up. So it doesn't do that. And I don't realize that halfway through the recording. Yeah, so that's basically how sort of like this works. So every layout has its own record in the database, which means that if you make a change to, for example, the template belonging to this specific layout, we can see on what resources that layout was used. So if you're familiar with the rebuild content button in version 1, where you can say, okay, rebuild all the entire content in the entire website because my template's changed, we'll be able to do that just specific for what you just changed, which saves a lot of time. If you have a website with hundreds or thousands of articles, then you're definitely going to benefit from having that additional structure. That doesn't apply only to layouts either. Every single block, so we're calling it blocks now, has its own ID, its own table with a reference to the name of the block, the type of block, and the data that belongs to it. So again, if you make a change to one specific type of block on your website, you will be able to rebuild just that one block across the entire site. So you still get the benefit, the speed improvement from parsing things when saving the resource. However, you also get the benefit of being able to make quick changes across your entire website. So this is something that's really, really important. You can also extend blocks. So what that means is that if we have a block and this block has ID, what was it? Was it 3? And this block has ID 3. You can add tables that reference this block and add additional metadata to it. For example, one of the things we're considering is integrating with version X for version control. What that means is that we can use that so that whenever you make a change to any specific block, the change in that block gets saved to version X. Instead of making a full copy of everything that changed on the entire page and needing to restore either all of that or none of it, you'll be able to do that on a block just because it has an ID. Because it has an ID. And that's just one example. I'm sure that there are lots of great ideas floating around, and I know we have a long list as well. But this is really why we needed this optimized data model. Because before in version 1, each block, each field was only an element within a very large array of content. And that doesn't necessarily make it extendable, doesn't give us any opportunity to give you more control over that. So that's very exciting. It gets a little technical, and if you're not into the technical stuff, that's totally fine. But that's sort of like one of the things why we started rebuilding from scratch. Another thing, everything in this interface is event-based. It's event-driven. So what that means is that we have a plugin-based system for you to add more advanced and powerful features into it. The way that, for example, this alert box, the way this style is applied is through a plugin. The plugin configuration, will show that in a little bit, determines like what colors we use, how it works. It's not built into an alert box field itself. It's composed onto other fields. Another example of where we do that is, for example, in the toolbar, we have this little full screen icon, which literally just makes it full screen, which might not be great for an alert box. Very colorful though. This is applied once to every single field and every single layout. So we can also make a layout full screen, which appears to be missing a background, which is fine. This is why this product is still in development. It's not done. Plugins like this can do anything. These plugins can add copy and paste functionality. These plugins can interact with AI modeling. These plugins are going to be used with version X. We're going to do styling. We're going to conditionally show hide fields. There are so many things that this plugin infrastructure allows us to do. It's incredibly exciting. and I can't wait to share all the documentation and all the examples with you as we get a little further towards the alpha release. We also changed the way the drag and drop works. So previously you need to drag anywhere on a field, which was notoriously kind of fickle. It would work or it would not work. We've replaced that with a drag and drop handler inside the toolbar, which makes it better to see like if it's actually triggering, and you will see where it inserts based on, that little blue line, as you can see. This makes it a lot more consistent, a lot more reliable, and much better for the user experience. So we're about to hop over to see some configuration of how we actually build this page you see now. But basically in ContentBlocks 2, every single element is essentially a group. So a repeater with a limit of 1. So if you look at this quote, for example, this is a group of a text area with a label, a text field, a label, text field, and then the drawer with a dropdown. Every single block in ContentBlocks 2 is defined this way, using different input types, using different elements that you can mix and match to build out your content. We are also going to be adding back the ability to have settings in a model window. So when we presented this in Berlin, we did get the feedback that people do want this ability to have sort of like this advanced properties sort of like hidden away in a model window. So that's going to come back. So just to confirm what input types we have built in right now. We have basic text, text area, number, rich text, image, color, heading, which could also just be a text field, icon, which uses font awesome. We have labels. We also have spacers. So if you want to just for alignment within the canvas, you can also do that. Those are the input types we have available right now. And basically any other input types we had in version 1 is on the roadmap, as well as a few new ones that we're excited to work on. All right, we're now going to hop into the back end of how you actually configure these fields, how that works, what you can do there. And this is going to get a little more technical. So if you just want to see what it looks like, this is what it looks like. If you want to know more about how this works, definitely keep watching, because we are about to see some coding. We're going to hop into, in this case, I'm using PHP Storm. Because one thing you should know about version 2 is that it actually uses file-based configuration. Where in version 1 you would need to use something like Gitify to get that done. You could also sort of integrate with PDO tools, but that only really affected templating and not really the configuration. In version 2, everything is file-based. Now, we might decide to build a user interface for this, so you can actually manage it from the manager like you did in version 1. However, because of this being file-based, it has a lot of advantages, especially around versioning. You'll be able to very easily get this into your Git repositories, copy, move, import, export. All of that is just a matter of copy pasting files. So that's something that's really quite exciting. In this case, we have our directory defined the score components _example. This is obviously something you can configure. All right. So basically we have 3 directories here. We have blocks, we have canvas, and we have layouts. These are essentially hard coded. These are the directories that are expected by ContentBlocks and the directories you will need. Starting from the outside going inwards, we start with the canvas. Now, a canvas is essentially what you saw in the browser. So this is the resource content canvas. We have built ContentBlocks 2 in such a way that we can allow multiple canvases to exist on a single page or on non-resources in other components and such. This is not necessarily a feature that will advertise for version 2. It's not necessarily something that will be formally supported in the 2.0 release. It is very likely that we'll sort of add that and whatever extra functionality it needs in 2.1 or 2.2, just because it's very advanced. And we don't want to delay the release for this feature. However, it does speak to the architecture that we're using. So we're no longer forcing ContentBlocks to only work on the resource content. You can use it on different elements in the future as well. So this file name, modresource.content.json, is what ContentBlocks looks for when initializing the content field on a resource. There's a couple things in here. For demonstration purposes, usually this will be empty. On a very new installation, on a basic site, you would likely have this file either be empty or defining some plugins, which is what I just removed for the example. One thing we're doing here in this specific website is we're adding a couple plugins. Now these plugins are JavaScript, so these are plugins that run in the front end. In this case, we're using a highlight changed plugin, as well as a full screen plugin. And now the full screen plugin also has some options that says we want to apply to blocks and to layouts. These plugins take advantage of the event-based UI that we have in version 2. So what this highlight change plugin does, as soon as you sort of like edit some content, it adds this little indicator on the right. That's all this plugin does. It's a very basic plugin. It's very quick. It's very easy, but it adds an important feature to all of your fields in this case, all of your blocks in this case. The other plugin we're using is the full screen plugin, and we already briefly looked at that, which allows us to, go full screen on any block or any layout. In this case, I'll explain why this one has 2 full screen buttons later, in just a little bit. So these are our plugins that we apply on the entire canvas. If you want to see what that looks like, and this is definitely a developer warning. This is definitely a more technical thing. Let's say we look at the highlight change plugin. A very simple code. We're defining a plugin called highlight changed, which uses a base class that we're extending, which tracks any blocks that have changed. And basically, because this plugin runs on the canvas, it's defined on the canvas. In this case, we're going to look at our init canvas function, which takes in an object, which is the canvas object, and any number of options that are defined on the plugin initialization. And we're just saying to the canvas, whenever a block changes or is added, we're going to handle that event. And that event is literally just going to say, okay, do we have a block? If we do not have a block, then we don't do anything. And then we're going to see, okay, does it have this specific class? And we add that class to it, if not. And we also just track what blocks we have changed. Very simple code for a very simple feature. Because we also define an init layout and an init block function on this class, we can also apply this plugin directly to only specific layouts or blocks. So any single plugin can have different functionalities depending on where it is defined. So the full screen plugin, for example, this one's a little more complex. This has a little bit more code, but this can also be applied to a block, to a layout, or to a canvas. And the way they function is just going to differ a little bit. So whenever the block renders its toolbar, we are going to add a full screen handler button to it, which just toggles full screen in different browsers. In this case, when we initialize it on the canvas, like we do here, this is our canvas, our content canvas. We're giving it options to either to load in both blocks and layouts. So we're only defining it once on our canvas, but it's going to add the button to full screen that specific element on all blocks, all layouts. what that looks like, basically we're checking if options of blocks is true. If it is, we're gonna listen on the canvas to any block toolbar event. All these events bubble up from the original block all the way into the outer canvas, which is the primary, the outer object. And then we're gonna use that to add our full screen button to that. And the same thing on layouts. So this allows for some great composition of having different functionalities, different features, different interactivity and abilities to really like add to specific things where you want it, without having to rebuild it every time you want it somewhere slightly different. We have a couple of plugins that we're currently shipping with version 2, and we'll probably extend on this as well. But for example, the color plugin is also really simple. It only applies to a block, so you need to specify it on the block that you want it to use. And we're basically taking in the color value, which is an input type within your block, and its value property, which in most cases is just value. And whenever that block changes, and the change is in the value we're looking for, so in the color input, we're gonna just apply the color to our block. So if you go back into our browser, so that works on this text area, for example. We're changing color to blue. It's gonna apply this blue color. Again, very simple way to make the front end look the same way as the back end, just using some different elements there. We also have the same for the background. Pretty much identical plugin, except it applies the color to the background instead of the foreground. Very simple stuff. And we have a more complex styler plugin, which is actually, it's not a lot of code. It's a bit more complex to set up, but we'll show that in a little bit. This is what the alert box uses. So, going back a little bit, we start with an empty canvas. A canvas just defines the outer object, outer element that the content blocks is initialized on. If desirable, we can add some plugins to that. Those plugins define some additional behaviors, toolbar buttons, that sort of thing. And that's our outer content. Next up, you want to define the layout. So just like in version 1, layouts are the different chunks, the rows within your content. Depending on the complexity of the site, you might only have a single primary layout, which is just full width. But you may also, have like split layouts where you have main content and some image on the side, or you may have some really, really complicated ones with multiple rows in single row, essentially. On the whole, most sites that we see use some sort of combination of a main layout and some sort of split columns. Layouts are defined in a similar way. So everything is basically JSON. Here's a full width layout. We can give this a title that shows up in the manager for users. We can add some optional text. In this case, we haven't, but that's going to be rendered sort of like here, just to give users some instructions on how to use it if there is a specific sort of like complicated use case going on. And next up, we define the columns. So in this case, we have only one column. The key of this column is main. It has a title of main. We don't currently render the title. However, that is something that is coming back as we get closer to the alpha release, as we're also bringing a new toolbar on every layout and column as we go. So this is basically a full width layout. Now you might be wondering, how am I going to style this? Where's the template? The basic way templating is going to work is you are going to add a file that has the same name as your JSON file, and it's going to have an extension that's either TPL if you want to use modx templating, Twig if you want to use Twig templating, and for other parsers we'll probably add some optional support But basically for our full width layout, if we want to go with twig, which is my personal favorite, we're just going to add that with the same name and put it in the same location. So full width.twig. And then we might have, let's say we have a div class row with column large 12 columns, whatever CSS framework you might be using. And then we don't use what autocomplete is suggesting. We use the key of the column. So in this case, a main. And this is just going to insert that. Similar if you want to use the modx templating that you used to, full width.tpl, and then you just use the modx syntax here to say .main. The ContentBlocks parser is going to take in all your configurations when it saves the resource, and it's going to determine which parser you're using based on the extension. That's the primary thing to note here. And again, this is something that's going to be configurable. So you will be able, if you prefer, modx ships with Smarty as well, if you want to use that, there can be a parser for that. If you prefer Venom, there can be a parser for that. We'll likely ship with modx syntax and twig out of the box for version 2.0. So this applies to all your layouts. This is how that's gonna work. If you want to look at a more complex layout definition, for example, this one has first a column that's 70% wide. This actually uses Flexbox. So you have a bit more functionality there compared to version 1. Again, it's gonna have a title that's not currently shown, but will be shown before we hit 2.0. So 70 width, 30 width means one row. 100 width means another full row, and another 30 to 70. And again, you can also define these plugins we talked about on the layout level. So if you want to only allow a full screen plugin on a certain layout, then you can easily do that. You can only add it to that specific one. And this works for any plugin that is available for layouts. In this case, I have it disabled because, as you know, if we go to our canvas, it already has this particular plugin automatically initializing on all blocks and all layouts. One thing to note, in the current development version, we don't have our layout options yet. That is also coming up very soon on my list. In addition to the repeater functionality I talked about, the next thing after that is going to be adding in layout properties, just like you had in version 1. Okay, let's look at the blocks. Let's look at the blocks next. So one thing that I immediately noticed here that's worth noting, you can add your own categories in the form of folders. If you have a lot of different blocks or a lot of different layouts, you can structure those with additional folders. At the moment, that doesn't affect how they are shown to the user, but this is likely how we'll bring back some kind of categorization in like the insert block window. So this will be sorted by your directories. Just good to note. The finding fields works the same. Again, we're just using JSON. In this case, we have a text area block. So that's this one. We give it a description. We choose an icon for it, which is shown in the add field or add block window. And then we define the inputs on that specific block, right? So as I mentioned, every single block inside of ContentBlocks is essentially a repeater already. It's consisting of multiple input types layout together in a way that makes sense for you. So we're defining the different inputs here. In this case, we're defining one with a key. The key of this input type is text, which is important when you're looking at your templating later on. And the type is text area. So this is just a built-in input type. Next, we can define any number of properties that this specific input type supports. So the text area supports, for example, minimum length, maximum length. There's some other required validation that you can optionally do. So this is going to give you a single input. Next, we define a drawer. So again, we talked about this before. The drawer is this sort of like part of the block that pops out when you select it. So if you look at the quote, the drawer here is the style selection. But we're looking at the text area. This is going to use the exact same configuration as the inputs. You can literally copy them from the drawer to the inputs. It will work. This is the exact same configuration. There's no change in how it works internally. Inputs is just the main, sort of like the content area that you're working with. The drawer is the bit that sort of pops out when it's in focus. So in this case, we have a color label. We have a color. And this just uses, the color label uses type label with a certain width. And we define some properties defined by this input type label, which is color. Which is the for attribute and the text on the label. For the color type, we specify input type is color. We again give the width and we define our properties. So for the color type, we currently have a hard-coded list of colors we're using, but this is something we'll be expanding on in a future update. And then we repeat the same thing, but this time it's for the background image. For the background color, not image. Again, we're defining a label, we're defining a color input type, and we're giving it the supported colors. Now, let's say right now I don't really like how this is laid out because it's side by side, and I feel like this would be neater if it was like below each other. To do that, what we're gonna do, we have our label is 20% wide, our color is 30. I'm gonna make this, let's say 40. And I'm going to add an extra input type here. I'm going to call it color spacer. Type is going to be spacer. Width is going to be 40. And that should, if I also make color 2 also be 40. And I also add a second spacer below that. Color 2 spacer. If we go back to our browser and we refresh, you'll see it's now, below each other, which I think looks a bit better. Now we can still change the colors and this is all going to work. Now, how does this one work? How does this apply the color? Oh, that's not very readable. This uses, again, a plugin. This actually uses the color and the background plugin. So we looked at these before. They're very simple plugins. The color plugin takes in by default a field called color. Now we happen to have a field called color here. So it's going to take that in. The background plugin takes in by default a field called background. In this case, we call the color 2. So we define here that we want the input key to be color 2. And these two plugins, are responsible for making it possible to change the live output of how this is shown. Using our simple color plugin. As you can see, I briefly talked about this earlier. So this field, this block, actually has 2 full screen buttons. And this is the reason for that. I have a full screen plugin defined here, even though I also have the full screen going on every single block already here. So just to fix that, I'm gonna take away that plugin. And if we refresh the page, you will see it now only has a single button to make it full screen. So this already gives you a pretty decent idea of how you might define fields or blocks that get a little more complicated. Where you can do some validation, you can have different structures and spacings and different plugins. This just works the same for every single block in ContentBlocks too. All the different options that specific input types expose are going to evolve over time. We're going to be making them more powerful. But this is basically how every single one of these blocks that we have defined here, how those are going to work. A simple text block uses the text input type, and in this case, we're setting a color and italics. So if we use that block, which is called text, you will see we have applied the italics to that. Again, some very simple styling that we can apply here. This is built into ContentBlocks. This does not need a plugin. We already looked at text area. We have our text options. This just shows a couple of different validations that we can apply. With at least 20 characters, max 5, and only A to Z. Here's basically how those are defined. These are all properties on the standard text input type. So if you require a specific type of data in there for your use case, there are options for that. We got min length, we got a custom placeholder, maximum length, and we got a regex pattern that we can validate the content on. A very simple drop-down input select. We can use a label for that. We can then use the type is select. And in the properties, we're currently hard coding the available values, which is also going to be supporting using Ajax to look up values as you did before. Populating it by using snippets and such. Rich text, very simple. Type is rich text. In this case, we're using Redactor on our website, so it's just using the default one. When we get close to the release, Redactor will also have its dedicated input type where you can select the configuration that Redactor uses. Quote, very simple, made up from a text area with a label for the origin, with a label for the author, and in the drawer we can select the style. So this is all very, very basic stuff. I'm not going to go over all the input types that we have here, all the blocks. A lot of this is going to be updated. Everything is documented for when we actually release the alpha, which is our first goal. So you'll be able to see what all the supported input types at that type are, what properties they support, how you can define different ways to use them. And of course, we're going to be shipping with just a basic configuration that lets you just install and go as we do in version 1. So yeah, what we've learned here, we start with the canvas. The canvas by default doesn't have too much configuration. This is something we'll expand on towards version 2.1 and 2.2. But it does let you define plugins that apply to the entire canvas. So anything that you want to apply on all blocks, on all layouts, which is things like this highlight, change, and full screen plugin, which could be things like a versioning plugin, stuff like that. You can define those on your canvas, and then you just define your layouts, your blocks in a very similar, very easy JSON structure. And once you have these files, you can easily copy paste them to other sites. So you can create a wide range of different input types that you want to reuse as sort of like a skeleton website, and then just pick the ones that you actually need to use on that specific site. That's going to be very, very easy to do. If you're interested to learn more about the data model, we can quickly take a quick look at this. These are the old classes that were version 1. We still keep those models active if you're familiar with Expedio, because that will help us with the migration. There will be a migration to help you upgrade your site from version 1 to version 2. So that's going to be reading your existing models. However, this is where the fun starts. Every canvas, we talked about the canvas before in practically all cases at the moment, the canvas is going to be the resource content. However, it is its own data object in the manager, which allows us to abstract away references to the resource. None of this is visible to the user. This is all very much handled in the background, but this is where the fun starts. Each canvas has layouts and blocks. The layout is referenced to the canvas. It has its own key that we can use to update if needed. There's a position on the page. It has a title, and then it has any data specific to that layout. This data does not include the field data or the blocks. The blocks are all in their own table, as we talked about before. So the position of a block inside the canvas, inside the layout, inside the column of the layout are all stored here, with the position to indicate where on the page it is. So having this all server-side and in the database model gives us more power, more ability to extend it, also more ability to enforce it. For example, when you're talking about locking fields, making sure they cannot be edited unless you have certain permissions, having that being stored server-side is very, very important to make sure that's secure. And then within the block itself, we finally have the data that is the actual content belonging to the block. All of this is very much done in the background. You do not need to know any of this if you're just building a website. If you're interested in extending ContentBlocks to and making plugins and that sort of thing, knowing how this is structured is, however, useful. All right. Now, as a little bonus, I will also show you how we build the input types, because you will still be able to build your own custom input types. The idea is that by having this plugin infrastructure, these events, that you won't have to build as many input types. You can just compose different input types together in your block, use a plugin to tie that all together, and just have it built from there. If you do have a specific new type of content that you want to use with, then you can definitely extend that. So to look at one of the more basic ones, the text field one, this is very simple. We're just rendering whenever ContentBlocks tells us to, and we track to make sure we only create an input type once. This is just a very simple input type. We have a class name here, CB Visual Input, which makes sure that it looks consistent with the rest of the page. This makes it look like just text, even though secretly, don't tell everyone, it is still an input type. It just doesn't look like one. And then we have some logic related to sort of like the functionality that we want to add to any basic text. Which means we have a placeholder that we also have the ability to override through the properties. And again, the properties are inside the configuration. So if we take this text block, we have our text input, and that has properties. So for example, it's using styles, but we could also add placeholder, then whatever placeholder we want, because the input type supports it here, loading it from the props. We can use event listeners. So whenever we change the input type, we update the store. Store is a bit of a technical topic, so we won't get into that this time. That's something we'll talk about a lot more later, though. This is just how we store the value. We have some more properties: max length, min length, required, pattern with some regex. And finally, we use a common method called apply styles that allows us to define this styles object to add any styles to any block that supports it. So any core input type supports this styles attribute to allow you to make sure that the preview looks similar to what the user is going to get in the front end. And finally, every time we call, every time the render method is called, we need to make sure we update the value of the input to the value that's in the store. This means that when the store changes from another place, which could be a plugin, we do update the value we show. We want to look at, for example, the icon input. In this case, we're defining 2 data keys. That's a new concept, which is the keys that we're going to be storing on the input types it's store. So the internal mechanism by which we save the data client side. In this case, value and size. So that means, again, on the random method, we're going to be building, in this case, it's a little visual container that's going to have a click handler. That click handler is going to open a new model where we choose the icon. So if you missed when we looked at it earlier, that's this input type. So we just click on it and we get this model in order to select a different icon. So this is a bit more of a complex input type. But again, this is all what we're doing here is already fairly well documented. It's not public, but it is documented. The basic way to think about input types and plugins in ContentBlocks is that an input type is a type of content, right? So input type is an image, a video, an icon, anything that's sort of like a certain type of content. A plugin is behavior. So when you want to change the way that that icon looks, you might use a plugin. When you want to change the color of it, when you want, that sort of thing is handled by a plugin versus a custom input type. Which means that no matter whether you have an icon or label or just a standard text field, you can use the same color plugin to change the color of that type of content. So that's a really, really powerful way that we're allowing ContentBlocks to be extended in version 2. So the current status that we're in for ContentBlocks 2 is that we are, the framework is roughly 92% done. We are working on I think the main things that we need to add to the core framework is the repeating functionality, so you can have rows of data. And the layout properties that I already mentioned, that the layout has a way of changing properties associated with it. We do have a roadmap published now. You can find the link below. You'll also find it in the blog post and everywhere else. This is the list of things we still need to do. This roadmap does not include anything that's already done, which is why I've tried to cover as many things as possible in this video to give you an idea of the current state, current functionality. So the roadmap starts basically when I get back from the snow up. So as I've already mentioned, we're currently in the development phase. This is the phase where we want to make sure that the core framework is done, is documented, and we can actually start getting people access to it in alpha. Things we're working on is the repeater functionality. You can click these items to learn a bit more about them. This has the biggest impact on the core framework from any functionality that we still need to work on. After that, we have block settings. We have layout settings that I've mentioned. We're going to be working on making the select input use dynamic options. We're going to add multi-select input types. We're going to add list types. We're going to improve the color input type. So while it already works, it's very basic. We're going to bring that closer in line with version 1. We're going to bring back a link input type, which is one of my favorite things in ContentBlocks 1. Just having a link input that allows linking to resources using autocomplete as well as emails or just basic URLs. Just makes it really easy for clients. We're going to be implementing the parsers, which is pretty much defined how that's going to work. We just need to build it. This is it's a bit of work. It's not necessarily affecting the rest of the framework. We're also going to be adding a publishing state, so you can say that a block or a layout is either visible or not. In the core, this will be a very basic implementation. However, the idea is to make this as extendable using plugins, so you can make more complicated rules, like this is only available on Mondays or whatever. So the basic function of that needs to be in the core, but the rest does not necessarily have to be. Might be, but doesn't have to be. It doesn't affect the framework itself. Permission-based locking of blocks and layouts, I already mentioned that as well. We have a set of fluid PHP classes that you can use to create or update content within ContentBlocks. Those were made a while ago and haven't really been updated with the latest versions of the data model. So that's something we will be reviewing and updating before we hit alpha, just to make sure those work as expected. But those classes are ideal for programmatically creating new content. We're also planning to look at canvas level block and layout settings. So what that means is that you'll be able to, for example, on the layout level, define that there's always a background style that you can select. And rather than needing to add that into every single layout you may have, you'll be able to use the canvas configuration to apply that everywhere. Configuration directory is currently hard-coded. That's going to be configurable. And the final item before we hit alpha is to package and document ContentBlocks 2. What that means is by the time we hit alpha, we will have a package available for early adapters to try and use. That doesn't mean alpha is ready for production. And we have said this before when releasing early versions of our major updates and new products to clients. This is very much intended for staging environments only. Alpha is not going to have feature parity with version 1 just yet. The goal of this development phase that we're currently in is to get the core framework and the bare necessities that you need done. Once we get to alpha, we will be getting more user feedback on how certain things work. We're going to adapt based on that. And we're going to keep working on that feature parity, making sure that every public API that people might be using for writing plugins or input types, etc., are all stable. That's the main priority there. In the alpha phase, we will invite agencies to try it out one at a time. It's not going to be publicly available when we hit alpha. As part of the fundraising we're doing, any agencies that do support are obviously prioritized for getting access to the alpha. However, we will definitely be slowly rolling this out as we go and collect more feedback. This is a complete rewrite from scratch. I want to highlight that again. This is not a minor update. There are going to be things that we missed, things that don't work. We do not want people to start using it on production just yet. However, this is the phase where we do look at making sure it has all the functionality that you may need to actually build your sites with it, which means more input types from checkboxes to chunks, code input types, file inputs, galleries, snippets, all these sort of different types of content that you can use right now, and porting those over to version 2. This is also where we'll look at the copy paste plugin again. I did mention it a few times and I do have a proof of concept, but I'm choosing to delay that until later on. It's not a necessity as much as some of these other input types are, and it is going to require some more development and definitely a lot of testing to make sure that works as expected in the way we want it to. At this point, we will also finalize a public API. By public API, we mean the interaction points for plugins, for custom input types, and also server-side plugins, making sure all those are defined and ready. And we're going to end the alpha phase by working on the migration toolkit. We have defined how it's going to work. That's basically going to let you import your version 1 configuration, have ContentBlocks to automatically rewrite those into the version 2 blocks, layouts, etc. And then once you're happy with that, you can tweak it as needed. Then you can migrate the resources either one by one, if you want to be really careful, or you can use a command line toolkit to run it on the entire site and rewrite all of those. Obviously, this relies on having all the different input types available. So this is something that's going to be the very last thing we work on in alpha to make sure we can automatically map those things for you and make it possible for any brochure type website, anything that only uses the core functionality to be easily migrated. If you have a very complex website, if you have a lot of custom code in your templates, a lot of customizations, we may not be able to automatically migrate that. We may be able to highlight things that might not work once you migrate. But that's something that we're also going to be working on in collaboration with all the people that have access at that point. Finally, once we hit beta, which is after we have the migration toolkit available, we're getting there. That's the final phase where we are going to look at all the feedback we've collected during the alpha release. Look at all the any bug reports, any stability issues, any cross-browser issues that we may have identified, and focus really on getting it production ready. Agency invites during the beta phase are going to be much quicker. We're going to let a lot more people in. We're not going to be as much of a pain in the butt as during the alpha about using this in production environments, as long as you know what you're doing. But this is where licenses are going to be available. We will be unlocking license upgrades, which will be paid for. And this is where we finally wrap up the development and start also planning our launch party. Because obviously, once we've completed all this work, years and years of work, there is going to be a great party where we invite everyone to join us, grab a drink, learn more about the product. And obviously, I hope you will be there too. There's a lot that's been going on with ContentBlocks too. It's a major project. It's been in the work for literally years. I'm working on it on and off. And I hope that this little insight into what we're doing gets you excited about the prospects, about what we're doing, about the vision we have for this. And if you are an agency, if you have the means to, if you're excited about wanting to try this on your clients, if you're already budgeting your license upgrades, please do check out our crowdfunding campaign on this. We finally reached a point with ContentBlocks 2 where, because the core framework's almost done, and there's a lot of sort of like filling in the blanks that we're doing with adding all these input types, adding all the features on top of this framework, it finally makes sense to start getting more of our team, perhaps even some outside contractors, to help build this and make it happen. As a small business, it's my full-time job, but I'm also constantly answering support emails and helping people with commerce extensions and whatever they need. If we have the funds to get more eyes on this project, we can move it along much quicker, and we are at that point where it does make a difference. A year ago, I know I've spoken to agencies in the past who were like, "Can we sponsor you in any way to make this happen?" At that time, extra funding wouldn't have helped because a lot of the core framework wasn't done. Right now, it is done. We can start building all these input types, working on all these functionalities that we want to provide on top of it. So this is where this comes into. If you do want to help us with this, we have a whole bunch of donation perks for that sponsoring, depending on the size. For one, every tier, no matter how much you help us with this project, you will get access to monthly developer videos. I'm going to be making more videos like this. They'll be shorter because this is much longer than I planned. But you'll get updates. I'll tell you about what we've been working on. I'll show you some things. I'll perhaps highlight specific features as we go. And you will get access to those videos. You'll get a number of license upgrades included in the support. So depending on how much you support, you might get some or all of your sites upgraded to version 3 for free. And you'll be able to sort of like designate which sites that will be later on as we get to the beta. We'll also get you some VIP tickets to the launch party, which means we'll buy you dinner. We'll get you drinks, and we'll have some entertainment during that launch party. just have a great time together and really celebrate all the hard work that's gone into this that you have helped make possible. Also going to include your company name, link and or logo, depending on how much you contribute, in the credits, which you're going to leave on the website, as well as the README in the package, just as a little thank you. We'll also be providing private workshops. So if you're interested in ContentBlocks, if you use it right now and you want to learn more about how you can use ContentBlocks 2 when it comes out, sponsoring our development right now will get you a workshop when we get to that point. These are online workshops, except for the top tier where we'll do it in person. We'll schedule these around the beta release or launch party, whatever fits you. For the even higher tiers of support, which would be wild and so much appreciated, we're also including sponsor branding at the launch party, if you're so inclined. Basically, we're saving up for that as part of the sponsorship. And for even ridiculous amounts of support, and even if anyone even just considers that, that's already so much more than I could ask for. We're including premium support that's available to you immediately. We've recently sort of quietly shifted our premium support over from a monthly model to a prepaid model, where you just buy a number of hours that are available for you for our premium model support. So you get some free hours along with that sponsoring. And we're also including GitHub access. So if you're really invested in ContentBlocks, if ContentBlocks is really essential to your business, to the sites you build, and you want direct access to see what's going on, to comment on issues, potentially even help build stuff, which is subject to some other terms, but potentially if there are people interested in that, we can talk about that. This is the type of support that would make a huge difference. This means I can take myself away from some client projects. And we are getting to that point where I do want to go all in on this project. I do want to get it done. I do want to get the alpha out this summer. And I really want to start giving this amazing new version of what we're building to as many clients as possible, as soon as possible. So if you are considering this after seeing what we're doing, that's already much appreciated. If you have questions about what we're doing, if you want to talk about any of this, please do drop us an email. support@modmore.com is the best way to talk about that, and we can schedule a call if needed. There is one more tier here. I'm not even going to show it, but if you have the means as an agency to really change the next few months of what I can work on, there is something special hidden in there with all the different ways I could think of to say thank you. Looking at this from a business perspective, if you are using ContentBlocks, I reckon a lot of you will probably be thinking, okay, how much are these license upgrades going to cost me once it does come out? Am I going to attend the party? What's that going to cost me? If you have the means to bring some of that forward, so we can use that to build ContentBlocks 2 now, it's a massive help, and I genuinely do want to say I appreciate anyone even considering it. At this point, I have no idea how this crowdfunding is going to go. I've set a goal, which would that goal would basically mean I can spend the majority of my summer and more on getting this project done, as well as getting more people to work on it while I have other things. Because I'm not going to stop answering support emails. I'm not going to stop helping clients. But having that extra funding now, instead of having a big payday when ContentBlocks 2 actually comes out and people are going to buy upgrades, it makes business sense. And I hope that this insight into what we're doing, the vision we have for ContentBlocks 2, where we are right now, and what we still need to do. Again, all of this is available for you on the website. I hope I can convince you that it does make business sense to work on that more and get that project out the door. It's been a long time coming, and I'm very excited to dive in, get it done, and if I can count on your support, that's greatly appreciated. For now, I'm going to start packing because I'm supposed to be going to Switzerland in give or take 20 hours. So thank you for watching this. I know it's a long video. I didn't mean to make it this long. However, there is a lot of things that go on in this project. I did want to give both a little bit of insight in the front end and the back end, a bit on the UI, how that works, but also some of the technical decisions and how that affects developers. So if you stuck around this entire time, thank you so much. Make sure to drop a like. I hate that so much. Have a great time zone. I will see you hopefully in the next developer update. Goodbye.